felt very to top up my part-time NHS wage.
Get my private practice off the ground.
My career while still being present for my little daughter.
To make that leap into independent practice a little bit easier.
To widen my community.
Access a wider range of clients.
To explore private practice.
Support more families.
To develop an independent practice.
Connect with a community of therapists.
Available for people who have been waiting.
To do the work that I love, but with the flexibility that I need.
Opportunities that I wouldn't otherwise have had as an NQP.
A way of working which could be really client-centred, but also more sustainable for my own well-being.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our conference. I'm absolutely delighted to open our conference 2025 on our 80th anniversary. It's brilliant to be here, and we have an exciting programme ahead for you all. But before we start, I would like to introduce Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Edinburgh, who is our patron, who's not able to join us today, but she sent a small video with some words.
I'm delighted to be sending you a message to open this year's Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists online conference. 80 years is a very special anniversary, a milestone that reflects 8 decades of extraordinary dedication, compassion, and expertise. As patron of the Royal College, I have seen firsthand the life-changing work you do. Speech and language therapists play such a vital role, supporting people of all ages to communicate, to connect with others, and to thrive. Your impact reaches far and wide, often in ways that go unseen, but are deeply felt by those you help. This conference is a wonderful opportunity to come together, to share knowledge, celebrate best practice, and learn from one another. While we may not be in the same room, I know the connections you build and the insights you exchange over these 2 days will be just as meaningful. Thank you for all that you do. I hope you enjoy a stimulating and inspiring conference, and I wish you every success in the months and years ahead.
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness, for that warm welcome and for opening our 80th anniversary conference. I'm Steve Jamieson. I'm the Chief Executive here at the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists. And as I said before, absolutely delighted to be able to open our conference today. This year marks our 80th anniversary, founded in 1945, and the programme balances reflection on the profession's history with forward-looking themes of innovation, of leadership, of workforce, public health, equity, and technology. And I'm absolutely delighted that over the next 2 days, we will feature 5 inspirational keynotes, 24 scientific sessions, 13 impact and innovation sessions, 69 posters, lunchtime sessions, and a variety of network opportunities, including the integration of AI to meet like-minded colleagues. But before I start, I've obviously got some housekeeping rules. So here we go. Questions. Please post questions in the Questions tab on the right-hand side. Questions will remain visible after the session and can be answered by presenters and the chair. The Chat tab. Use the Chat tab function on the right side to share comments and feedback. Respect. The Q&A and chat box are well monitored, so please be kind and respectful when sharing these thoughts. Help. If any technical help is needed throughout the conference, head to the Help Desk tab on the left and speak to one of the platform technicians for support. RCSLT related questions and queries can be directed to Tom or Francis via the RCSLT exhibitor page in the sponsor area. And then the Challenge Hub. We have a fun competition running throughout the conference, and the 3 gift cards are up for grabs. So head over to the Challenge Hub and check out the actions you can complete to climb the leaderboard. And at the end of each session, a code shared on the screen. You can enter the code in this Challenge Hub to earn more points. Now I'd like to talk about James Law. Speaking of prizes, I'd like to congratulate a couple of individuals. Thanks to the generous support of Jane Mercer, the James Law Child Language Prize continues. James's legacy by empowering early career researchers to share their work and build the networks that drive our profession forward. We're absolutely delighted and congratulate this year's recipient. Vali Gupta, Personal Narrative Assessment in Childhood, a systematic review of methods, measures, and implications for inclusive practice. And Dr. Hannah Harvey, I don't want to be this uptight, pushy person continuously fighting for my child. Parental Perspectives on Development Language Disorders. Congratulations to both of them, who will receive £1,500 to support their conference participation. The sponsor slide. Our sponsors, we're delighted to have sponsors this year from Silk Road as our headline sponsor, and I'd also like to welcome Splaus, who are our gold sponsor, who are an AI-powered practice management platform transforming healthcare. And now it's great pleasure that I'd like to introduce James Benson, Chief Executive at Central London Community Healthcare NHS Trust. James is a speech and language therapist with a background in complex neurological communication disorders, and he shares his journey from clinician in Sydney, Australia, to CEO of Central London Community Healthcare Trust. James, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our conference.
Steve, thank you for inviting me to join. And colleagues, I'm actually in Australia. I'm on holidays. And I'm kind of reminded of the fact that I'm sitting in my parents' dining room, a room that I have sat in for many years. And if I was to consider sitting and speaking first at the RCSLT conference when I graduated many years ago as a speech pathologist, I don't believe that I would probably think that that was the case. In thinking about what I was going to say today to colleagues, I'm going to reflect on not just my career, but what I think I've learned in terms of leadership and how to navigate leadership in quite complex times. And I think that's ever so important as we launch into a very, very different world, a world that I think will impact our service users and us as a profession. So I'm presently the Chief Executive of Central London Community Healthcare NHS Trust. I know I've got some colleagues probably listening to me this morning. And hello to those of you who work with and for me. But we are the largest of the community trusts in England and support over 10,000 people a day with a variety of different health and care needs. And we have quite an extensive children's and adult speech and language therapy service. As an organisation and through the sorts of things that we do, I support the team to deliver really different types of care for people in their own homes and in their own communities. And I'll touch on why I think that's going to be important for us as a profession, given what the government has set out. But I was thinking today, I graduated as a speech pathologist with a degree in something that I didn't really probably understand when I went to university at 18 and graduated in 1998. And that was a linguistics degree. It was not a science degree. I was in the second year of graduation for a very new course. And it was a course that was set out to fundamentally transform the way that speech pathologists would work in Australia. So moving from a taught education program into one that was experiential with significant levels of clinical practice. And I think that's important because one of my reflections, and I'll come to this a little later, about being a chief executive is about constantly being the speech and language therapist. And many colleagues will know that I often reflect that I don't like the term I was a speech and language therapy by practice or by profession. I think it is quite a binary thing. You either are or you are not. And fundamentally, I believe that I still am. And I'll share with you why I think that's important from a leadership point of view. But my first job was in St George Hospital in Kogarah in Sydney, and many of you probably won't know where that is, but it's south of the CBD. And it was a really enjoyable time. I learned a lot and had some very good education experiences as a new graduate. But it became really obvious to me that if I wanted to progress my career, I was going to need to look further afield. And then decided one wet Wednesday afternoon to take a job in London, and a job for 8 weeks, having resigned a perfectly good job in Sydney, and decided I'd go to London for 2 years. Now that's 22 years ago, so I think I probably outstayed my welcome. But my first job was at the Whittington in London. And I can still recall walking on my first day into what was an ITU, and an ITU in a Nightingale ward. And Steve and I have talked about this before, what it was like to literally work in hospitals that were in effect still Victorian hospitals well into the 1990s. And it was a complete shock to the system. I had come from a hospital that was relatively new to walk into something that I had no understanding of. And in that first week, I was needing to deal with people with accents that I had never heard in my entire life. And you can only imagine, as a speech and language therapist, what that was going to feel like when you were entirely unsure how dysarthric someone actually was. And then I realized very quickly that if I was going to stay in the UK, I did not really like working through an agency. And so took my first clinical permanent role for Mildmay International and Barts and London NHS Trust. And for those of you who know Mildmay, it is the international provider of complex HIV care and support for individuals. So this was the early 2000s, where we still had individuals who were presenting with AIDS-defining illness late in life with quite complex communication disorders. And communication disorders that thankfully we don't see in the same way as we did then, by virtue of the fact that, especially in London, we are moving, hopefully by 2030, to net zero new cases of HIV. And I think that's really important in terms of thinking about our career. And I suspect for many colleagues on the call, if we look forward into 10 years and 20 years hence, when the college will be celebrating its 90th and 100th anniversary, the sorts of people that I have seen, I know Steve and I have discussed this, sorts of people that we have both cared for, and the types of processes and presentations do not exist in the ways that they did even 10 years ago. And I suspect we as a profession will be dealing with very different things. In my professional career, we still had people with significant dysarthrias, dysphasias, dysphagias, and other communication disorders related to stroke that we simply do not see in the same way as we did then. But I decided, after working for a number of clinical years, to take a leadership role and set up an inpatient rehabilitation service. And I think that fundamentally changed my career, and changed my career in a very different way, because it became clear to me that I probably was going to be able to deliver greater interventions and support for people with communication impairments if I took a more significant leadership role. And after many years working within a primary care trust, I continued in that same organization, became a director of operations, and then took my first executive role. And my first executive role was not actually even in a clinical or operating role. It was the director of improvement and responsible for estates, IM&T, transformation, informatics, and corporate contracts. Something that I never ever thought, and again, reflecting on the fact that I'm sitting in my parents' dining room, I think they probably thought that I'd completely lost the will to live, that I was doing something very different. And I think it's very important for us as professions and professionals as speech and language therapists, if we want to navigate our career, something that we need to consider is stepping outside of that career for a period of time and learning different types of skills. Because in learning those skills, my reflection was that there was clearly some things that I was okay at, some things I was probably quite good at, and other things that I really, really could not handle. And that's important. And I'll come to why that is important in terms of building my career as it is today. But for those colleagues on the call who know me really well, I then became the Chief Operating Officer of the Trust, the same trust that I work in and work for now, but I became the Chief Operating Officer at the time of COVID. So I had only been in the role for 6 months. And the most challenging thing that I have ever done professionally was not to be a speech and language therapist delivering complex care, but to be a speech and language therapist when I had to agree that we were going to need to stand down our children's services. And in standing down those children's services, being acutely aware that that is what the government required us to do, and that recognizing what that was going to mean for my colleagues, and particularly for the children and families that we support. It was not something that I took lightly, but it fundamentally altered the way I believe that we need to step forward into the delivery of children's services moving forward, especially as we start to transform services into a more community and prevention focus. So as the speech therapist, as a 18-year-old, when I became the chief executive of the Trust 4 years ago, I was reflecting as I signed the instrument of accountability that the career that I suddenly had before me was not the career that I had even envisaged as that 18-year-old going to university. But my first learning point on that reflection was that I was very fortunate to have been and continue to be a speech and language therapist. Because the one thing that I was taught in my degree was how to communicate, how to understand the nature of communication, how to recognize what I was trying to communicate, what I was hearing from other people, what I was seeing in other people, and what I was trying to achieve. And that brings me to my probably second big learning point, and something that I think colleagues might want to reflect on in terms of their careers. We are fortunate as speech and language therapists in that there is quite clear evidence about what works in terms of therapeutic paradigms. But there is also clear evidence that as therapists, we are canny enough to understand what interventions we might want to put into place, how we will work with our patients, our service users, to understand their goals and their aspirations, and to tailor a program for their needs. And that is fundamentally the same thing that I think we as professionals need to consider in our own careers. How do we start to understand where we are going at every single point in time in our career, understand what interventions we might want to put in place to help us build that career, but similarly, what things we might want to do that just make good common sense. And for some of that, that is really how we start to identify what are the timescales in which we would want to continue in our roles, change our roles, or in some cases, can be happy to continue in the role that we are in. Steve knows that over the last few weeks, I've been writing my speech. I was going backwards and forwards, writing it on the plane as I was flying from London to Australia. And we were texting this morning, basically, just I think entirely to check whether or not I had finished my speech. And I had, but I decided to change it. And the reason I changed it was because I was literally sitting, I'd been for a swim at Meriwether Beach, and I was sitting having a coffee watching the surfers. And it is a beautiful beach. And it's a beach that I have grown up on for many, many years. And it suddenly dawned on me that our careers are much like surfers. We have to spend time sitting out in the ocean. We have to learn the skills of us as professionals. We need to know how to watch what's happening around us, how the currents are moving. We need to understand our own skills and abilities. And then we need to be able to watch the waves. We need to be able to understand what roles might be coming forward, what we find exciting, what we might want to do. But at some point, we have to catch a wave. We have to take a step. We have to take a step into a new role. And that might be a role that we know very, very well, like the wave that we have surfed many times. Or it may be something completely different and exciting and novel. Now, if any of you have ever watched surfers, you can spot who can do it very well. And even those who are doing it really, really well, you can also see when they catch a wave that they weren't quite expecting. But surfers in the middle of a wave, or us in the middle of our careers, need to be able to get onto that wave and to continue to ride it. It's both scary, it's exhilarating. There are times you know what you're doing, but you're not entirely sure whether or not you're doing it the right way. But enjoying it, learning from it, continuing through it is probably the most important thing. You know that the wave is going to end. You know that you'll probably finish that component of the wave or your role in this instance. And you'll sit back in the water and you'll wait for the next one. And the next one might be something you've done before, or it might be something completely new and exciting. And I think that is actually probably one of the most important things that I have learned in my career. Not necessarily deciding what I wanted to be. I certainly, when I was 18, didn't think that I would be running a large community trust in London. But accepting that I had multiple different skills, that I could actually turn my hand to multiple different things and do that for both myself, my patients and service users, but also my colleagues. And that's exciting because as a speech and language therapist, I've probably delivered more in terms of the care of people, children, adults, young people, people at their end of life, as the chief executive of the trust. And that excites me and makes me particularly happy in terms of our profession. The government, however, has set out quite a bold strategy for us in the UK. Many of you will know that there are 3 shifts that have been put forward, from hospital to community, from analog to digital, and a new prevention agenda. And I think we as a profession are best placed to step into that, and best placed to step into it largely because we have the skills to do all of those 3 things at once. We fundamentally know that the way we communicate and how we communicate both as children and as adults in multiple different settings. So a shift into the community, a shift into the greatest communication environment is something that we completely understand professionally. The shift from analog to digital is something that we are all dealing with. The fact that I can be on this call speaking with you and to you from the other side of the world at a different point in time. 10 years ago, that was not even remotely possible. It's both scary and exciting, and it's definitely for me one of those waves that you know you're going to have to get onto, and I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to be able to surf that one that well all the time. But it is going to completely transform our profession. It's going to completely transform our professional lives as well. And I suspect that I will need the support of colleagues to help me understand what some of that leadership looks like, how I support a very different type of workforce moving forward. And lastly, the move from treatment to prevention. I think in my career, too much of it has been focused on the needs of people who had communication or swallowing impairments. Steve flagged that I was pretty much, for my entire career, an adult therapist. And therefore, by virtue of that, the types of things that I have done professionally as a clinician have largely been in the treatment space. But I think there's a real opportunity for us to think through what are the things that we are going to do, especially around digital, that will transform the way we support individuals to prevent the need for treatment. Even in my own lifetime, and in the lifetime of many colleagues who are on this call, we have stepped forward into very, very different prevention agenda. I reflected earlier around stroke pathways. Stroke pathways in and of themselves now prevent quite complex needs, needs that we saw before. I think the profession is in a very, very good place to step forward and think through what the organisation of RCSLT, we as a profession will look like in 10 years' time. And I suspect that in 10 years' time, the sorts of things that we will be discussing, the sorts of things that we will be promoting, not only as leaders, but as clinicians delivering direct care, will be fundamentally different from the things that we do today. Steve, I'm going to leave it there and go to any questions that colleagues may have.
James, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, there are some questions coming in. So I will start off with the first one. It says, "Hi, James, this is really great. Thank you for your presentation. What additional training and courses have you found helpful in your clinical and leadership journey?" So I am one of those clinicians who basically has a Bachelor of Speech and Language, or speech pathology. I have no other formal qualifications at all. I do not have a master's. And that is largely due to the fact that I have done a variety of individual short courses across my career. I probably have focused more on understanding my own skills and abilities, my reflection on individual training in the organizations that I've worked for, and the fact that I probably pretty early realized that I wasn't going to be a professional clinician much longer. I think if I hadn't been the Chief Operating Officer during COVID, I probably would have gone and done a master's in healthcare management. But at a point in my career where a good 4.5 years of that was spent running an organization, I moved into a space where I became the chief executive. And it's probably a point in my career where I might want to do something as my career ends rather than necessarily now. Too frequently, though, Steve, I think there is sometimes a belief, and this is not just as speech and language therapists, I think this is pretty much across the board, that we need to do more and more
training and education. And I'm not entirely convinced that that is always the case. What I would advise colleagues to consider is what is the type of work that they would want to move into moving forward, and then tailoring their education needs accordingly.
Thanks, James. The next one coming in is, which aspects of your SLT background have you found to be most beneficial in your work as a chief exec?
So definitely working in complex HIV. One, because if colleagues can consider working with people with complex communication disorders related to HIV in the early 2000s, you had to learn humility and respect simply in a way that you had never understood before. You had to learn how to deliver interventions, how to make change in a world where you weren't entirely sure what the right thing to do was. And I think that's very much the role of a chief executive, making the right decision when simply the right decision is not in front of you. And the third point was probably dealing with loss and dealing with getting it wrong. And certainly in my professional career, not making the right decisions, not delivering the right clinical interventions because there was no right clinical intervention, really set me into a space of understanding that you've got to have a plan, you've got to be able to execute a plan, and you've got to also understand when the plan isn't working. And that is definitely related to my professional role working with people with HIV.
Great, thank you. Was there a specific moment you felt ready to take the leap into leadership? And did you have any worries that this maybe wasn't the right step in your career?
I probably sometimes do, actually. I remember getting the call from my previous chief executive, who said that he, within 3 days, was going to become the regional director for London, and I needed to consider what action I would take over the weekend, and would I consider becoming the interim chief executive. I was actually in the pub at the time. It was at a point in lockdown when we were allowed to actually oddly go to pubs. And I remember walking back in, it was a Friday night, walking back into the pub feeling violently unwell. And violently unwell because I knew it's what I wanted to do. I knew that it's probably what I thought the organization needed, but being very scared. And I suspect Steve sometimes feels like this as well sometimes. The role of the chief executive is not something you can prepare yourself for. As you move into increasingly more senior roles, there is no short course that you can do. You have to execute it in the way that you believe it needs to be executed. And for those colleagues on the call who work with me and for me, that is often how I feel every day. Many colleagues on the call will know that the government has just announced the first wave of advanced foundation trusts. Our organisation is fortunate to be in that first wave. And when I got the call to say that we were going to be in that wave, again, I felt both proud and excited, but anxious at the same time. And it is something that I think colleagues, if you want to go down that leadership path, it's something you're going to need to be able to deal with.
Thank you. A really interesting question from a student, speech and language therapist, who says, as a student SLT in my final year, what is one piece of advice you think would be useful, and how would you, I'll start again. What is a piece of advice you think would be useful, and what would you like to have known at this stage in your career as a student?
then whatever decision, but the first thing would be whatever decision you take, whatever job you take will be the right job. But I think we often forget that when we go to an interview, that we are being interviewed and we ourselves are interviewing the organization and the colleagues we're going to work with. And this is the one thing I would probably suggest to you. Be prepared to answer the questions. No, do your research. Know the organization you are proposing to work for, because you already know how to do the care. You fundamentally know what you would do. It's more about, will you actually be able to fit into that organization, and do those new colleagues have your back, and will they support you in those new roles? I'm going to be seeing my first boss for dinner in a week's time, and we are still very, very firm friends. She was both helpful and challenging, but I definitely acquired a very, very good colleague from my first role.
Really, really important. Lots of questions coming in for you, James, so I hope you'll bear with us on this.
Oh dear.
How do you go from being a clinician to a director of operations? It seems a big jump. So how did you achieve this? And from a genuine place of intrigue and fascination as an inspiring leader. So the question's coming from an aspiring leader, how you made that jump from director of ops, from clinician to a director of ops.
So I think, so the reason I made the comment about surfing, and to flag, I can't surf, not all Australians can surf. Sometimes you've just got to catch the wave and believe in yourself. And too frequently, I see people not believing that they can do the job. If you have managed a team, if you've managed a budget, and let's be honest, we have all managed a budget because we all manage our own budgets. You can actually do it. Stepping into leading people is no more difficult than delivering a moderately complex clinical intervention. You have to have a plan. Understand your plan, understand whether or not you'll be off, and start to think through, what if your colleagues were actually the people that you were there to support, like as a therapist, and have a plan for how you are going to support them and what you would do to make their lives better, their careers better, the way that they care for their patients and service users better. And it all of a sudden starts to fall into place. But the first thing you've got to do is believe that you could actually do the job. And part of that is just a little bit of gumption and self-belief. But I genuinely think speech and language therapists can, because the one thing we can do is communicate well.
Great, thank you. Hi, James. What an interesting journey and what an adventure you've been on. What are your views on advanced clinical practitioners across the NHS and the difference between advanced practice speech and language therapist and the advanced clinical practitioner speech and language therapist?
So I think this is going to fall out quite significantly as we start to move into a world where more care is going to be delivered in the community. I think over time, there's probably not going to be a significant difference between the two. But what I think we need to understand is what are we trying to work on? Is it fundamentally our own ability as clinicians? Are we trying to create a different role for us, or are we trying to deliver something very different for the people that we are here to serve? And I think it's probably going to be the latter. The fact that we have a difference between the two, I think we might actually see that if we start to be both more generic and more specific at the same time in the community, we might actually see the coming together of those two types of roles. But I don't actually have a firm position on it yet, and it's probably because I think we just need to see what the world might look like with more care being delivered in communities, and that I think is going to be increasingly important also, especially for our children's services, and I suspect we'll see quite an increase in those as well.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got time for a couple of more, James. This is a bit of a long one, so I'll take my time at reading it. So it says, research evidence is increasingly highlighting that more intensive speech and language therapists is required to achieve the best recovery for our service users across many speech and language conditions. However, this is often in the context of greater demands on SLTs and fewer resources. What are your thoughts and recommendations on how to take this issue forward within our own trust and highlighting it to our leaders?
I hope that's from a member of my staff, actually, because I completely agree. So I think the first part is actually, we've known that forever. We've fundamentally known that, and it's why I reflect on that decision that we took nationally around standing down children's services. We need to intervene early. We need to intervene much earlier, not only in the lives of our children, but also in the lives of young people and adults. I think we need, as a profession, within organisations, in NHS trusts, in non-NHS trusts and organisations and private practice, to literally start to demand that more people need to be seen sooner. And we have a real opportunity here. The fact that His Majesty's government is pushing in the United Kingdom for this prevention agenda, I think requires us to talk through and understand quite eloquently why we as speech and language therapists need to intervene earlier. We've got the evidence. We know what it costs. We now, all of us, need to be able to have that 10-minute speech in an elevator ready, so that we can describe that to whoever asks. And part of this is also how we do that. So, I know Steve does this. I know colleagues in college, but all of us need to be able to eloquently articulate why we believe that early intervention is important. It's cheaper. We will have better outcomes. And we need to be able to describe what those outcomes are. So I think we probably professionally need to double down as a profession, and certainly in organisations, to be able to describe what the outcomes are, what the inputs look like, and why we believe that we can deliver more for less.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. The final question, which I think is a really important one to end with, it's how do you look after your own personal well-being, considering the stressful job that you have?
I'm saying this back to the chief executive, basically said, oh, come on, you can do a call from the other side of the world at the conference. Some of it is accepting that that I have made a decision to be the chief executive of an NHS trust. So I'm fundamentally responsible for a registered population of 4 million people. We have on our books 300,000 people, children and adults, being seen every year, and I've got 5,500 staff. The operating budget of the organisation is just shy of $500 million. If you took the words NHS out of this and described the chief executive of that organisation, they would be working quite a lot. They would be using their financial resources to care for themselves, to take things away from them when they need to. They would also make sure that they take a good holiday. They'd also make sure that they intervene on things that they think are really important. And this is one of them. So I'm not doing this because I want to sit in my parents' dining room and have a chat with people on the other side of the world. It's important that we, as professionals, understand how we balance our life, taking time out for ourselves and our family, but also taking time out to do the things that you know are really important. Because sometimes if you don't do that and you miss those opportunities, you can kind of kick yourself later. And for me, thinking through what I was going to say to you today, whilst at the beach, having a cup of coffee, it's pretty relaxing, actually. I'm on holidays, but it allowed me time to really think through what I was going to say. And I tend to do that quite a bit. I'm fortunate because I don't have a clinical caseload anymore, that I can manage my time in a very, very different way. But in doing that, you just have to learn what works for you and what works for the organisation, the patients and the colleagues that you are there to support.
James, thank you. It's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure to hear you today. And I just want to thank you from all of us at RCSLT for your time, for the preparation you put into your presentation this morning, and for doing this, as you say, on your holiday. We really, really do appreciate it. There are some real major nuggets of thoughts that you've left us with to go away and think about on that leadership journey. And I think, you know, as the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists develops its Inspire Leadership program, I think there are lots of nuggets that we would want to, you know, take from what you've said today and put that into our leadership program as we look at how we develop our members to become leaders of the future as well. And I know that you're a real supporter of the Royal College. So again, just thank you so much for your time with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I just want to end with a couple of sort of final notes from me. One is around the sessions that we've heard today will all be recorded and available to watch after the event has taken place. And you'll be able to find those recordings in the video tabs, which is great. Today is our AGM at 12:45. I would really encourage all members of the Royal College to come along and listen to our Chair of the Board of Trustees and our Chair of our Finance Committee to talk about how and understand how your membership fees are being used and how we're shaping the profession. If you are a full RCSLT member, we strongly encourage you to join our meeting today. The feedback after attending live sessions, please leave feedback for the speakers. I think it's really important. It'd be great for James to hear what others have thought about his presentation and the content that he's presented to us. And not only is it really invaluable to our speakers, but it's also invaluable for us as we plan our future events and conferences. And you'll also earn some points in the Challenge Hub, as I mentioned earlier on today. And the Challenge Hub secret code for today will be shown at the end of all of the sessions. We're now, I believe, sharing that code with you, and the more sessions you attend, the more points you'll earn. So please feel free to make note of that challenge code. We've now got about 20 minutes left for you to explore the poster presentations and to engage with our sponsors and our exhibitors. And the first round of all of the parallel sessions will begin at 10:15. But just finally for me, I want to say a really big thank you to everybody who's joined us today and to make the start of our two-day event a really successful one. And again, thank you to James for his presentation this morning. So have a wonderful 2 days of conference, and I look forward to seeing you all later on today. Thank you.